Ron Moore, as a showrunner, you're living the dream here. You've got a show that the critics love, but the people are wildly insane about it. And I have my theories as to why the show gets this reaction. But I'd like to know what your theory is.
Well, it all starts with the book. We were handed a good story to begin with some really great characters. When I first read the first book, I thought it was a unique story that I hadn't seen before. I think that's a big appeal. It's sort of a unique tale, of this woman going back in time and, having a love triangle through the ages, and then, just the fact that we're dealing with two periods, and it has a lot of different genres it encompasses. It's got romance, obviously, but there's a big action-adventure quotient, there's time travel, there's conspiracies and politics and historical fiction. So I think it covers a lot of ground, and I just think it's a show that people haven't seen, and that's like always a big appeal.
Yes to all of that, and it's female empowerment. That's kind of rare, isn't it, on a big show that has this much investment behind it. And but what I'm getting at in terms of the big answer, I think, is the first way you answered the question is this romanticism about the show. We live in an age where everybody has to be cynical and cool, and a guy has to condescend to love a woman. But here, I think you show great respect to the tradition of romanticism, which, let's say, in an opera, people don't just love someone; they love someone, And I think my guess is it's your background on Star Trek that you learned in a way that's like space opera, right? Is that you learned that these emotions are big, these quests are important, and you need to just go with them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a show. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Star Trek certainly had an ideal of the future. It had a romanticism about what it was about, and so what the journey meant to the different characters. And every week was a morality play in a lot of sense. And I think certainly Outlander taps into that notion of, yes, big feelings, big emotions, high stakes and high ideals. We're dealing with a Highland culture that values a man's word above almost anything else in the world. And what does it mean to give your word and to stand by it? What does it mean to fight for a cause? What does it mean to love somebody truly and deeply and forever? And there are certain romantic ideas that imbue the whole body of the show, and I think that give it a certain tone that is a little bit different. I agree with what you're saying, that what's out there on television typically is it's easier to go to a cooler, hipper, more cynical place because we can all just kind of play on that field rather easily. And when you ask something greater, when you're asking for a higher cause or something idealistic like that, if you're not careful, it becomes too earnest and it becomes naive, and then people really turn it off. So it's always a delicate line when you're trying to ask the audience to believe in something higher, and you're asking them to go to this higher place. They kind of are wary to go there because they don't want to feel foolish and they don't want to feel naive. So if you can take them to that place successfully, then I think you've accomplished something kind of special.
I think the single most successful play, I haven't seen the finale yet, but I have seen everything else several times. I'm really an actual fan of this show. And what I think the single peak scene is a scene that is totally wordless. And I'd like you to tell me how you did the scene, which is the wedding night, the final scene. She is in the room. Jamie has left. The ring goes off her finger. It's rolling across the floor. It almost falls in the crack. She grabs it. She has now 2 wedding rings in her hands. She holds them upward to the sky as if to God or whatever. And the look is just brilliant. It's the big emotions. It's the central conflict of her life, totally expressed without words, but yet how did you write that scene?
On the page, it was, she shakes out the wedding dress, and she had put away the ring that Frank had given her. It had been tucked away just before the ceremony.
Right, she did.
So the script, she shakes out the dress to fold it up, and the ring bounces out and skips across the floor, and she chases after it and grabs it and then holds it up and looks at the 2 rings on her hand. What happened in shooting, which was sort of just a wonderful sort of coincidence or happenstance, was the ring literally rolled across these floorboards, and it did fall into a crack standing straight up in the air. It was a miracle. And then Anna Forrester, who was our director and was also, her background was a DP, was able to focus in. You could see Cliff's reflection actually in the ring, sort of, it's almost a Lord of the Rings shot, but it wasn't CG, and it was just one of those sort of things that you find like actually in the show. And then the rest of it was all Caitriona. It was just like her expression and her face, and you could feel the emotion. You could feel what was going through her head as she looked at the two rings on her hands.
What? That's a great story. Give us some other stories, if you could. Just things that you discovered while shooting them. That you take a lot of chances. First of all, just departing from the books, which is pretty brave. But I think that everyone, pretty much, even fans of the book, respect what you're doing and enjoy what you're doing. But when you know you're venturing while writing the script so far, but when you actually get to the shooting scene like that, what were some other moments from the season that were discoveries? In other words, the improv on the set.
Well, that was pretty special. But, other things have to do with some of our locations. We stumble across, or we happen to find light coming across, the castle at a certain time of day that gives it a certain magic hour kind of look. A lot of things are just sort of accidents, where you have actors on horses who are not familiar with being on horses, and suddenly the horse kind of takes off, and then we include the shot because it looks like the actor took off sort of with a purpose, going someplace. I'm trying to recall if there's any others. The ring was like a special moment. When we saw it in dailies, we were all, oh my God, Anna, how did you do that? Because it wasn't scripted that way. How many takes did it take? She was just like, it just happened. It was just one of those minor miracles of photography.
Tell me about the scene where she's at the Stones, right before she tells Jamie what's up. And she's at the Stones, and she can go back in time, go forward in time, and meet her husband. And what I found interesting about the way you shot it was she's reaching for the Stones, she's going to do it, and then we don't see her pull back, but in the next scene, we see that she has pulled back. She's with Jamie. She reveals all, or maybe it's just right before she does it. But the point being is that you chose not to see her pull back, and then it's this wonderful kind of viewer surprise when the way you did it. So when you make decisions like that, what's behind it?
Well, that was a decision based on the part of the audience that doesn't know the books. As I do the job, I'm always keeping both audiences in mind. There's the audience that loves the books and knows them backwards and forward, and they're looking forward to certain events and certain lines and how we're going to realize them. And then there's the audience that doesn't know anything about the book. That was a moment that I set aside for the people that don't know the book. Okay, what is Claire going to do? Because it's perfectly viable to say that Claire was going to go back into the 20th century, and then the show would go back to the 20th century for a time and find some other means to take her to Scotland, or there's various ideas that the audience could be playing with. So I wanted to preserve the question of what did she do, go to black, and then sort of start in on Jamie's side, where he's lying there by the fire, and again let the audience wonder what was about to happen, and then have her voice come in off camera, just say, "On your feet, soldier," and let that be the reveal, so that you could sort of be in Jamie's place for a moment and experience the fun of, oh my God, she came back for me, and that was more of a heartfelt moment. When you said the Stones, it did remind me of one of those happenstances of filming. In the pilot, there's a scene where Claire goes up to Cragnaddon, and to pick the flower, and this is the scene where ultimately she does travel back. There's a shot there where she goes, she's about to pick the flower, and she hears something off camera, and she turns, and suddenly the wind picks up, and it blows her hair, and her hair kind of falls down her face, and it blows up beautifully again. And that was just an accident shoot. We didn't have a wind machine up there. We weren't timing it for the wind, but literally it was almost like on cue. The wind rose literally as she turns towards the camera, and the wind just like picked up her hair and added immensely to the scene. It was one of those great things we saw in dailies. Went, oh God, that's fantastic.
Like Beyonce in a wind tunnel shooting a video.
Like Beyonce in a wind tunnel.
I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, and heard the really wonderful story about the scene where in the wedding episode again, but this time her marriage to Frank, and the fact that the outfit we see her then in the 1940s was inspired by the actual outfit that that Caitriona's grandmother wore, or was it your grandmother? Somebody's grandmother wore when they got married. And so first of all, clarify that. What was?
I believe that was Caitriona's grandmother. Where I'm venturing into territory because my wife Terry is the costume designer, and
I know.
It could have been her grandmother's, for all I recall, but I think it was Caitriona's. Yeah.
What other things in the show throughout the season are special, neat things like that that you wish you could stop the show and say to everybody at home, "Hey, by the way, you should know this," you know?
There were a couple of lines that I put in the wedding show that were lines that I had said to my wife, and there were a couple of lines in the Lollybrook episode where I had Jamie say things to Claire that were things I had said to my wife. So there were like inside references that meant a lot to Terry and I, and I knew that these were her favorite books. So it was great to be able to have her characters sort of say something to each other that was something that we had said to one another. So that it was inside stuff like that would happen.
And as I recall, one of those things is when they meet outside the church right before the wedding, and he looks up and says to her about, I forget the wording, but what a revelation.
It was as if he says it was as if the sun came out.
Yes.
Which it was something I said to her, my wife, when we first got together. We were working on a show called Carnival for HBO, and we weren't together yet. And I looked across the production table at a production meeting, and I was just struck by the way she looked. Every time she moved forward, it was like the lights came on in the room, and when she moved back, it was like the lights went out again. And I told her that later, and that was the first time that she kissed me. So it was like,
oh wow. Hey, whose idea was the utterly brilliant casting choice of making Toby play both Frank and Jack? Because there's no way that obviously that's in the book. It's so brilliant because it sets up all these emotional conflicts that enrich the TV experience in such a huge way.
That was an early decision, not necessarily for Tobias, but I just decided early on that we were going to cast the same actor in both parts. That, it was in the book that when Claire saw Jack Randall that he looked so much like Frank
Okay.
So I thought, well, then we should do it. We should like cast the same actor. And I thought there was something interesting too. It kind of reminded me of the stage tradition of Peter Pan, where you always cast Wendy's father as the same actor that plays Captain Hook. And I thought that was kind of an interesting sort of echo. So that's why we went that direction.
What little tales from the set can you tell us? For example, I was at a Q&A last night for Grace and Frankie and Jane Fonda and Lily Tom and the rest of it. We're all telling stories about the fun things, what they do in the morning to kind of tease each other, or a song somebody sings on a date. Or we know on film sets that George Clooney's always pulling pranks. When I've see many actors on set, they're knitting or they're playing a banjo. What kind of things do your actors do that are just kind of fun, personal things?
Well, all the male actors who play the Highlanders, first thing in the morning, they have to put their kilts on. And they all have to put their kilts on themselves in their trailers. And they all have their own way of doing it. They all have to lie down, and it's an intricate process of pleating it and wrapping it around. So that's how they all start their days. Kat actually sings in between takes. Like, she's just sort of starts singing, and we'll sit around the set just kind of singing, off on her own, which is why we decided to give her that little singing bit in episode 14 where she's out on the road with Murtaugh. When we went to her and said, okay, we're going to have you sing in the show, and she was completely like freaked out. No, I don't sing on camera. I'm not a singer. I just goof around. I said, no, you have a great voice. You'll do well. She was like, no. We had to really talk her into doing it. But that's like her method of relaxation with everybody.
And the fact that she sings Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, I mean, a variation of it, it's just hilarious.
Yeah, it was great.
Any other tales from the set that are fun? Nothing goes according to script in Hollywood, so
like I said, there was a lot of stuff with horses wandering off when they're not supposed to, and they're having to get them back and get the actors, because there are certain actors that are really good at horses and others aren't, and the horses always seem to know the difference. So that the actors that are not so experienced, inevitably their horse will just decide, I'm going over there in the middle of this take, and the actor will be like giving his line, I don't know where I'm going, he's taking me somewhere, and then we have to like call cut and bring him back all the time. The castles are incredibly cold to shoot in, so everyone's like freezing their butts off in all those scenes, and as soon as we call cut, they're all like getting
It's shot in Ireland, right?
It's shot in Scotland.
Scotland, right. And what's a typical shoot day like? What time do they have to get there? What time do you start rolling?
We do a 10.5-hour day, and call is usually around 8 o'clock in the morning. And it can vary a lot in terms of light. Like during the winter months, the sun isn't even up until 9 or 9:30, and it goes down around 3:30 or 4. We're getting now into the summer, And it's completely the opposite. Now the sun is staying up until like 10:30 at night. It's coming up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Because people forget Scotland is about as far north as Alaska. So you get into these extreme differences of day and night, which really complicates our shooting. There's also a lot of weather variation. You know, the saying in Scotland is, if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes. And that's absolutely true. It rains almost once a day, every single day. And it's just cloud covered, sunshine, rain, hail, sunshine, cloud cover, rain, hail. And so there's a lot of just dealing with the elements over and over again. Sometimes you can see it when it's raining on camera, and sometimes you have no idea when you watch the finished product. And we're all sort of astonished that sometimes we can remember being out on those locations and it was pelting down rain, and you don't see it just because of the light and the way it looks. But the actors all look kind of sweaty and bedraggled for some reason.
Caitriona never looks sweaty. How did you know? Speak of Caitriona, when she, let's say, looks across a windy moor, or she's in these scenes like you said, the side with the hair blowing back, there is this regal kind of glow about this woman, that this chiseled, magnetic quality. I know you know what I mean. Every viewer of the show knows what I mean. It's just this fantastic presence she has on screen. How did she have that in auditions? How did you cast her? Because her spirit, her look, all of that is so integral to the success of this show. How did you choose her?
That was the most difficult role to cast. You know, I thought that we'd cast Claire rather quickly because there are really a lot of great English and Irish and the Scottish actresses to choose from, but it turned out to be a very difficult role. I said that I needed Claire to be somebody who you could watch think on camera, that, you know, her intelligence was her primary characteristic to me for the character. And it had to be somebody that would wear well with the audience, because she was literally going to be every scene every day for months on end, and we were going to be doing her voiceover. So the audience was going to have to really like her, really get used to looking at her, listening to her, being inside of her head. And that was a very tough challenge. We kept seeing a lot of good actresses and just feeling like it's not quite her. And Caitriona just sent in her own tape. And it was an unsolicited tape. It came in. Casting directors responded pretty quickly. It got to me and the rest of the producers, and we just got excited because it was the first time we had seen somebody that we all just kind of sat up for. And we were only like a week or two out of shooting at this point, so we were starting to really sweat this. But right from that audition tape, she had the quality that you're talking about. She holds the camera really well. You get drawn into her eyes. You know, what she's thinking, you see it play across her face. She's a very emotional actress, and when she's upset, whether she's angry or she's, you know, bereft, you know, you feel it, and it feels genuine and real, and you kind of feel it along with her, which is a very rare quality. And in the show, first season, you know, it is Claire's point of view, and we're tracking with the book, so you're intimate with her every episode, every scene, and she's able to maintain that intimacy with the audience. It's a remarkable job. You know, it's not something you could teach, and it's not something that I think you could even design. And Caitriona just has that. You know, it's a very magnetic. She draws you in. If she's in a scene, you inevitably start looking at her and seeing what she's going to do. You know, there was an episode we did early in the season of The Garrison Commander, where it was basically just her and Tobias in a room, and just her and Black Jack Randall for a very long time. And it's his scene, by and large. It's him telling us the story of Jamie and the flogging and all that through his point of views. But she's there reacting through it all. She doesn't have as much to say, but she's incredible. She's holding the screen with him, holding the scene with him, with just the look on her face. And it's a remarkable talent. I mean, I think the world of Caitriona. She's just, we're really, really lucky to have found her.
Yeah. And she has that quality person. I met her just once, but it was over at the it was at BAFTA Tea at the Four Seasons earlier this year, and she came up and said, because we had done one of these, and so she said, "I know you, hi." And I was just, to meet her in person was just, and to see that same kind of quality was quite something. What happens now? How do you sustain this? What do we go into season 2? What can you tell us?
Well, season 2 is based on the second book, which is called Dragonfly and Amber, and it's a completely different book. And so one of the strengths of the show, I thought, was that every episode was so different from every other episode. It doesn't really have a familiarity. There wasn't really a standard or cliche Outlander episode, because every episode was so different and took you to different places, new characters, new situations. Second season is very much like that. We're going to Paris in the 18th century. So you're dealing with the court of Louis XV, the French aristocracy. You're in this urban setting, whereas we were in Scotland. It was much more rustic and rural and pastoral and heavy woods and stone. Now you're in the City of Light. Now you're in the gilt candelabras and fine chinas and jewelry and people, the wealthiest people in the world. And it's a completely different world from what we saw first season. And now it's also more about politics and intrigue and the Jacobite uprising and Claire and Jamie trying to stop that. You're dealing with real historical figures for the first time. We'll meet Bonnie Prince Charlie. We'll meet King Louis XV and other people of the era. And it's all moving towards the Jacobite uprising and a war story ultimately into the second season. So it's a very challenging show to do because it does keep changing, and we had to literally invent a whole new television series going into year 2. But that's also kind of the fun of it. It keeps it energetic and exciting because you're not doing the same show next week that you did last week. So hopefully year 2 will give audiences a whole different thing to look at.
It's also obviously quite expensive. How do you rein in the costs? How do you get Chris Albrecht to sign these checks? What? This is a huge production.
He opens the checkbook. He's not afraid he and Sony both. They're both more than willing to support the show. It is an expensive show, but we're experienced producers. I've done period pieces before. Some of them have been in the future, but I've done a lot of period pieces. So there's a style of doing a production like this, and you sort of make your bets of where you're going to think you're going to spend all your money and places you think you can save it, and you just do your best that you can. But we made it. We were on budget last year.
Excellent. Well, Ron, this is great. It's a treat for me to meet you in cyber terms, and congratulations on this show, and good luck at the Emmys, and good luck moving ahead.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.